Hi, Rob Harris. How are
Hi, Marcia.
you?
I'm good. How are you, Marcia Ramirez?
I'm so good, and I'm so happy to see your face. I don't see it nearly as often as I would like. We used to see each other a little bit more often before the pandemic hit because we were
Right.
out traveling together, doing house concerts together. You and your amazing wife, Laura, she would come along when she could, and we
Yep.
had a lot of laughs, a lot of
We did.
tears, a lot of life together. Those
Yep.
long drives,
We had a
I,
blast.
we had so much fun. I miss them. We'll talk more about house concerts in a minute, but
Okay. Because
I
they're coming
just,
back.
they are coming back. And
Yep.
yes, we will definitely talk about that in a minute. Um, but first of all, I'm so grateful that you are coming into our little God and my girlfriend space as one of my very favorite and trusted guy friends. And guy friends are important. And you and Laura have supported me and this ministry from day one too. Y'all have just been so encouraging to me with the ministry, with the podcast, with everything. And you know, Mike and I just love you, some of our closest
Well,
friends.
same here. We love you guys too. And Laura and I are so proud of you to have jumped into this endeavor a couple of seasons ago now, having not done it before, and you've just figured it out, and now you're just excelling at it. And
Aw.
I'm absolutely honored to be one of your few guy friends to be a part of this. I listened to the podcast with Mark Smeby, and he set a pretty high bar for guy guests. So I don't.
Oh,
I'll do my best.
you're great. Mark's awesome.
He is.
Well, and the other thing is I always like, I want to have at least one guy on each season because we can learn from our guy friends. And I also like to start and end with real friends of mine. And so you
Gotcha. Well,
cut
thank you.
you got both of those covered for me. So thank you, my friend.
My pleasure. And by the way, I've listened to a lot of your podcast, and I know it's that I'm not the primary target for what you're doing, but I benefit from them too. So you're just doing a great job, and I
Thank
hope
you,
you just
Rob.
keep going.
Oh man.
Yeah.
See, that's why I love you so much. You're awesome. Um, you know, it's funny because when you're interviewing friends, it's a whole different thing. And we talk all the time, right? But
Right.
you were one of the guests that I was like, okay, what are we going to talk about? What's going to be our main topic today? Because we could talk about so many different subjects. And I also was trying to come up with questions. I told you earlier, like I wanted to come up with questions that I didn't know about you.
Okay.
And that was hard. That was tricky, but we'll see. We're going to see what we have for you today. And but before we get into the interview, I do want to say real quick, I know that you and Laura have gone through a lot of really major life changes lately. Just how long has it been since your daughter Amanda got married and moved to Germany? What was that? Two years ago?
2.5 years ago.
Two and a half. See, 2020 feels like it just that year just like got set aside. So
Right.
everything feels like the
Almost like
time.
it doesn't count. It's
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
yeah.
So it feels like last year she moved, but it's been 2.5 years.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I know that was huge. And then we'll talk about it in a minute. You've been going through a major job shift. You've been sort of preparing for this for a while and
Right.
now are in the thick of that. And then the biggest thing I know, you've been through a deep family loss. Laura lost her father here recently, and you've been
Right.
going through all of that. Of course, Laura and I talk, and I got to have a really sweet chat with her on the phone just the other day and catch
She
up.
told me about that. Thank you for doing that.
Well, she's on my heart because, Laura and I have so much in common with that. We're both only children. We're both daddy's girls. We were both taking
Right.
care of our dad. So I understand her journey. Everyone's path is a little different, but I do
Right.
understand. And when I was going through it, Mike was my rock. And I know I watched you be the same thing for her. And she told me that. It's hard though, because you and Mike are grieving too. Y'all were grieving too. You love Vince, Mike loved my dad, and everyone sort of rallies around, the child. But I know it's been
Right.
hard for you. So I just want to start off by just saying, man, obviously you guys have been in our prayers, but how are you doing with everything right now? You doing okay?
We're getting there. You're well acquainted with this journey. I know you've walked that same path, and like you said, everybody's journey is a little different. But
Mhm.
um, I think the big pieces of the things we had to do, just the practical things that you have to do after a loved one passes away, I think most of those are taken care of now, and we can start to process the grieving part of it. Although we've been grieving all along the way, but now it's like we can kind of take a collective breath and just try to start to move forward.
Mhm.
Laura, as an only child, a lot of the details fell on her shoulders, and I've tried to help her as much as I can, but there are some things that only she can do as the executrix of the will and those kind of things.
Exactly.
So we had a memorial service for him here. Let me just quickly say what an awesome guy he was. His name was Vince D'Addario, and he
Mm.
was he was a director and an associate director with ABC Sports for more than 40 years, I believe. And over the course of his career, he earned 15 Emmys for things he had covered in the sports world, like World Series and Super Bowls and Special Olympics and Monday Night Football and the Tour de France and Indy 500. He covered some of the biggest sporting events in the world, and that was
Yeah.
his work for 40 years. So he was an amazing guy.
Oh, wow.
And after we had our memorial here in Tennessee, we went to New York, which we just did last week, and held a memorial for a lot of his former coworkers from ABC and different places, and that was really sweet. Just to see how much he was loved and respected by his coworkers, and
Mm.
many of them called him their mentor, and that he was directly responsible for them having the career they had. So it was just a really beautiful way to honor him with his coworkers there. And so I just wanted to tell everybody what a great guy he was. He received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Directors Guild in Hollywood a few years back
Oh, that's
for all of his
fantastic.
work. And his speeches on YouTube, people could look it up if you just go to
Aw.
YouTube and look for Vince D'Addario and Directors Guild, and it'll come up. But he was an amazing guy. So we're doing the best we can, trying to get
Yeah.
back to a new normal.
I only was around Vince a few times. He would come to the Bluebird when you and I would play there,
Mhm.
and he was very unassuming. You would never know, all that
No,
he had done and accomplished, and just the sweetest man. And
yeah,
yeah, it's a hard time, but um, one of the things that Mike and I love about being y'all's friends is being able to take a really close seat to your lives and watch how you handle transitions like this. And you always handle them with your faith and your
mm,
family, and you just handle them so beautifully, and it's inspiring for us as your
well,
friends. So
that's so
thank you
kind
for
of you to
that.
say. I don't always, we don't always feel like we do, but it's really kind of you to say that.
Yeah.
And thanks for asking how I'm doing. I had the privilege of speaking at his funeral, and you were there. I know Mike couldn't be. You guys have supported us so much through this journey and other chapters of our life. But when when you have the responsibility and the privilege of doing something like that, I mean, I loved Vince like he was my dad. We had a
Yes.
great relationship, but um, to to be involved at that level in his service, I almost have to disassociate myself from it in the moment and just get through, because you spend days preparing for what you're going to say at his service and try to honor him as well as you know how. And then you still want to grieve too, but you have to kind of put it on hold temporarily to get
Hmm.
through that.
Yes.
And then after that, my grief process could begin. So, but I'm doing better, good days and bad days. Hopefully you get to a point where there's more good than bad. I'm not sure if something like that is anything you ever fully get over. You just learn to deal with it and walk with it the rest of your life. And it does get better, but I'm not sure it ever completely goes away. Would you agree with that?
I definitely agree. And you've lost your parents. I've lost both of my
Right.
parents, and it's you learn to live with this new normal,
Right. Right.
the grief. I told Laura on the phone the other day. I mean, I still have moments of grief that are so strong that they bring tears to my eyes, but they're fewer.
Yeah,
Those deep waves of grief are not as often, and they're not quite as deep, and
yeah.
you
I
know,
still
we
have those too. My
I
dad's
re-
been gone 28 years and mom's been gone maybe 11 or 12 years. And I still will have moments like that.
yeah, we'll never stop missing them,
Right.
right? But we
Right.
also know that they want us to live while we're here
Exactly.
and not stay in that deep grief
Right.
pocket. So it's,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about something fun now.
Okay. Okay.
Let's talk about music, because you and
Okay.
I initially connected through music. We were
We
both
did.
songwriters, professional writers, both had
That's how we met.
publishing deals. That's right. I think, did we first? I'm thinking that we first met going to the Yellowbird.
I
Is that
believe you're
correct?
right. In Atlanta. Yeah.
In Atlanta. We did a show down there. And
I'd heard about you for years through, because we had a lot of mutual friends, and
right.
through people I was writing with, I was aware of you and I knew some of your music, but I think that's when we met.
That's right. That's insane. Yeah, I'd heard so much about you, and everyone was like, "You will love Rob Harris. You will love Rob Harris," and I did. I loved him. So, you were far along in your journey, but like, how old were you when you first picked up a guitar, like, and started like finding like, oh, I think I like to play music. When did that happen for you?
I was in the 8th grade. So what age is that? 13, 14.
Probably.
I had been in school band. I think the first instrument I played was snare drum in the band. And then I moved on to alto sax. So I was in the marching band in my middle school. And I'd expressed an interest in guitar, and my dad played guitar, and he had an old Gibson that I have hanging on my wall here in our house.
Really?
And he taught me my first few chords on that Gibson. And that guitar, I've checked into it. It's not worth a lot of money, but I wouldn't take $1,000,000 for it because it was my dad's and he taught me on that guitar. So he taught me my first chords. And I remember being so frustrated, like trying to get my finger in those shapes and getting them to stretch over the fretboard. And I was saying, Dad, my fingers are too short. I'm not made for this. And I was so angry. He said, just keep with it, because you're asking your fingers and your hands to do things they've never done before. And
Right.
8th grade fingers at that. So, but he taught me my first few chords. And then I started taking guitar lessons locally at a community college from a man named Bill Dixon. So I went once a week for, I think, 6 weeks after that, and built on what my dad had taught me and taking lessons at the community college. And that's kind of where it started. And I listened to a lot of rock and roll records at the time. I was a big Kiss fan and listened to a lot of heavy metal. And uh, I still love that stuff, but my musical preferences have changed a lot over the years. But I would go home and sit in my bedroom and listen to Kiss records and try to play what I was hearing. And it just kind of grew from there. And then when I got to college, my musical taste really started gravitating towards artists like John Denver and James Taylor and Dan
Mm,
Fogelberg. And I started
yeah.
listening to just a lot of acoustic artists, because when I first started learning, it was with an old electric guitar, and I would haul this electric guitar and amp into the guitar lessons. And in college, though, I switched to acoustic and developed a real love for that style of music and singer-songwriters. And it's kind of where it started.
Is that when you started writing songs?
I think I wrote my first song in high school, and predictably, it was probably about a girl. I don't even remember the song, but um, don't we all start writing songs about things that are important to us at the time, whatever it is? And it was some, I don't even remember, but I started in high school, and I've just done it as a hobby over the years, and then started doing it more competitively, if that's the right word, in the years after I got married and we moved to Nashville. So
Right. So you grew up in West Virginia.
I did. I grew up in southern West Virginia, a little area called Chatteroy, and it's a little 4-mile stretch of road tucked in those beautiful West Virginia hills. And where I come from, we call that a holler.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Chatteroy Holler, and it's in Mingo County, West Virginia, that's situated right on the West Virginia-Kentucky border. And grew up in Chattaroy, Williamson area. Then I went to Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. If anyone's ever seen the movie We Are Marshall, it's all
Yeah.
about the tragic plane crash that claimed the lives of the football team back in the 70s. So
Right.
went to Marshall, then went to Bible college after that, and jumped into life.
What was music what brought you to Nashville?
In a way, I guess in a manner of speaking, ministry is what brought us to the Nashville area, but it was a music ministry, a worship ministry. I was a worship pastor at a church in the Franklin, Tennessee area for just shy of 10 years. And so that's what brought us to the area. It wasn't like, I want to go to Nashville and chase this dream of songwriting and, trying to be an artist. That wasn't it, but it
Okay.
was music related, but it was more ministry.
Okay. So you came because you had a job as a music minister at a church, at that Franklin
Correct.
church. Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. I was
Yep.
thinking that you had come before and then that just came. So see what I'm
Yeah.
learning about you today?
I,
I'm learning.
I thought about that over the years because I was somebody who, as a kid, I mean, I always listened to the radio. I loved music. I couldn't wait when a new song came out that I loved to go to the store and plow through the singles and the albums and find one and buy it and take it home and put it on my turntable. And I read all the liner notes. And I've loved music for as long as I can remember. And my first job actually in Williamson, West Virginia was a radio DJ where I got to play music. And then when I went to college and I was at Marshall, I continued playing music. I would play coffee houses back even before coffee houses were cool and a thing.
Yeah.
But I played coffee houses and on campus, and I've loved music for as long as I can remember it. It's all I've ever really wanted to do.
So did you have designs on being like John Denver? I mean, did you want to go into and be a professional, like secular? Because I mean, I did at one point when I was younger. I was like,
Yeah,
ooh, I want to do, I want to be Faith Hill or whatever.
sure.
But
Well, I would be lying if I said I never thought about that. I did think about that. I just lacked the confidence, and I thought my skill level probably wasn't up to that level where I could record and play music where people would want to come and pay to hear you play. I just wasn't sure that I was that good. So I never really chased that very far. But I did dream of that at one point. I sure did.
when did you when did you feel the call to go into ministry?
I was at Marshall University, and I had become a Christian when I was in high school. And the way I would describe it, I don't know if this will make sense, but in high school, I made a decision to follow the Lord, but I didn't make a commitment. I kind of went back to some of my old habits and unhealthy things. And when I got to college, it got worse. And after I sort of reached a series of dead ends with my life in college personally, I thought that, I know now it was the Holy Spirit just in the back of my mind whispering, this is not where you need to go. You need to recommit and get back on track. So I recommitted, and I probably committed for the first time in my life to Jesus when I was later in my college years. And the more I grew to learn about him and love him and try to serve him, the more I had this nudge that I wanted to serve him full time, and I didn't know what that meant or what that looked like. And I checked into a Bible college that was about 30 minutes away from Marshall. It's called Kentucky Christian College at the time. Now it's Kentucky Christian University, about 500 students. And I graduated from Marshall and then went down to the Bible college to study and prepare for a couple of years. And because I loved music so much, it just seemed like a natural fit to combine the work of ministry with my love of music. And that's how I wound up getting steered towards worship ministry. So I had a guitar, and at Bible college, I didn't even know worship leading was a thing. I didn't even know there was a
Oh,
position
really?
at
Yeah.
churches for that. And occasionally, people who had weekend ministries or something that say, hey, why don't you come lead some songs for our youth group this weekend? Or, hey, a bunch of us are going out to the lake tonight. Why don't you bring your guitar and sing? So these little opportunities just started presenting themselves, and I just kept going through the open doors. And
Mm.
then I worked at the college for about 8 years. I served on staff there in a variety of capacities, but my favorite position there at the very end, my last job, was campus minister. And it was like being youth minister to a bunch of college age students. And I
Oh,
loved that. But I really did desire to work at a local church, and that never really left me. So I accepted the call to, Gus just jumped on my keyboard.
I saw
Gus
Gus's
might be-
tail.
Yeah. Uh, I accepted the call to be a worship pastor at a church in Harrodsburg, Kentucky, and did that for 4 years. Then after that ministry ended, we moved to Nashville and took a worship position at a different church here. And we can talk about those chapters to whatever extent you want. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, I know that you were at the church in Franklin for what, 13 years?
No, just shy of 10.
10. Okay, 10
Just a
years.
few months short of 10 years.
Right. And we have talked a little bit. We won't get into a lot of detail, but I know that when you left that, um, it affected you and your family in a really difficult way.
It did.
Um, how how did that? It's interesting because I'll just say it seems like lately I see a lot of people in ministry, pastors, music ministers that are going through kind of public fallings.
Mhm.
They're either I mean, it does seem like I hear like a higher rate of suicide, and then there's moral
Mhm.
failings and just
Right.
ministry burnout. And even some people that I'm hearing that have been in the faith, public faith leaders that are saying they're not even calling themselves Christians anymore. They're leaving the faith completely.
Right.
Um, as someone who has been in ministry and not in ministry now, I mean, I feel like you have a pretty interesting perspective on that. What do you attribute all that to?
The the changes you're seeing in people who are in ministry and the things you just talked about.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Boy, that's a great question. I'm not sure I have a great answer for it. Ministry can be extremely rewarding and fulfilling and satisfying, but it can also be incredibly isolating and lonely at times. And there's a lot of pressure, whether it's self-induced or otherwise, for people who serve in ministry. There's a lot of expectations, whether they put that on themselves or it's forced on them by externals. But there's a lot of pressure, and um, I think if somebody doesn't handle that pressure appropriately, it can bear down on them to the point where it shows up in those ways. Or in some cases, maybe they're disappointed or they're hurt in ministry, and they think, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And I'm
Mhm.
not even sure I want to be a part of this faith anymore. Um, and and just let me clarify, I think one appropriate way to handle some of those pressures is to get some counseling or some therapy.
Mhm.
As a caregiver, as a pastor, you're involved in trying to meet the needs of a lot of people. And if you're not taking care of yourself along the way, that can be a recipe for trouble and disaster. So I really recommend. I've known pastors who don't want to do that because it'll show up on my insurance, and people will think I can't handle all this. Well, guess what? You can't handle it all by yourself.
Right.
And if you
Right.
try, I think maybe that's it. Maybe they try to handle it and shoulder it all on their own, and eventually they can crack. So they need help.
Right. Which is something that we'll just transition right now into what your new job is.
Okay.
So you because I'm so excited because I think God has been prepping you for this like your whole life. I mean, obviously you need to be doing music too, and we'll get back to that in a minute about what's in store with that with you. But your new job is well, just tell us about your brand new job.
Yeah, I am. Well, let me say this: for the last 10 years and 3 months, I worked at Costco in Brentwood, Tennessee. After the last church ministry ended, I went into the retail world. I was hurt and disillusioned by all the stuff you just talked about. And so stepped into the retail world. And I loved working at Costco. I met some amazing people, great coworkers who are great friends of mine still. To be honest, I kind of went in kicking and screaming when I went into the retail world because I had been involved in ministry at that point for over 20 years. And but that was just me. I was just disappointed and hurt. And I used to work at a church, and I used to do this, and I used to be involved in stuff that had eternal significance. And now I'm selling TVs at Costco, and it was just a pity party. I'll just admit that. And it
Hey,
was
yeah.
all me. The longer I was at Costco, it was interesting. The more I think God gave me a little bit of a ministry there with some coworkers and friends. And I never hid the fact that I was a Christian, but I didn't always lead with the fact that I was a recovering pastor.
A recovering pastor. I love that.
So, but eventually, I don't know, I guess people found out, and I got outed as a pastor, and was able to do a wedding for a couple of coworkers who were engaged, and I was privileged to do their wedding. And so I had a ministry, just like we all have ministries as Christians. No matter what our job is, we have a ministry to the people around us. So I had lost sight of that in the beginning of my days at Costco. And then it took me a while to realize that you still have a ministry because you're a Christ follower, and that just accompanies a life of following Jesus. You just get to minister to people around you, hopefully. So, but anyway, I left Costco about a month ago, and I am now working with a nonprofit called Standing Stone Ministry. And their entire purpose is to provide pastoral care to people who serve in ministry. So that's what I'm doing now.
And it's absolutely free, right?
It's free.
Any pastor. And when you say pastor, what is a pastor?
Sure. In our context, we use the term pastor to refer to anyone who is serving in ministry. So it could be the lead pastor, it could be the youth pastor, the worship pastor, executive pastor, a missionary, any of those. And beyond that, if you serve in ministry, Standing Stone is willing to help you, because there are unique pressures that accompany a life in ministry. And most of us who work with Standing Stone now have experienced those firsthand, and maybe it gives us a little special sensitivity to it because we've walked through some of those things. Pastors deal with the same stuff that everybody deals with. They go through job loss, which I know a thing or two about, which maybe we can touch on. They go through anxiety, experience depression. They have struggles in their marriage. They have financial troubles. Like you said, suicides and attempted suicides are increasing at an alarming rate among people who serve in ministry. The pandemic wasn't kind to any of us, but it was really hard on people who serve in ministry, because the church experience changed during the pandemic. So, but anyway, when a pastor is going through something like that, or some personal struggle, or maybe they have an addiction that nobody knows about, that they're quietly struggling with for years, who do they talk to? I think the fear is in the back of their mind, if I'm honest about my struggles and I talk about this openly, I could lose my job because pastors aren't supposed to struggle, which isn't true at all. But you kind of think that, and other people think that. So that's where Standing Stone tries to help. If a pastor is going through a challenging season, we walk alongside with them to try to help them get healthy, so they can spiritually healthy, so they can continue leading for years to come. We hope, from a place of health instead of a place of dysfunction.
As someone who personally has experienced the breakdown of two pastors I was at two different churches, and two incredibly gifted communicators on the stage, brought so many people to the Lord. I know their heart was in the right place in the ministry, and I saw both of their ministries crumble after after several years, and the hurt that brought on, not only to them as humans, to their families,
Right.
to the congregations that were left behind, going, but wait, you said, you know,
Right.
and now you're like, it is a horrifying thing to go through for everyone involved. And but now I was starting to see, oh, it's going to happen again and again and again if these pastors don't have someone to hold them accountable, to walk beside them and give them counseling in a safe environment. Because, like you said, I have a particular good friend who was a pastor. He started having a crisis of faith. And it's like, who do I tell that I'm not sure the
Right.
Bible is inerrant anymore? Like, who can I talk to about that? Because I
Right.
will lose my job if I
Right.
utter that, right?
Right.
Or like you said,
Exactly.
how do I tell people that my marriage is falling apart, that my wife and I have been sleeping in separate bedrooms for a year and putting on a face because we know that I'll lose my job if
Right.
I can't imagine those kind of pressures.
Right.
Um, and so the fact that there is a nonprofit, Standing Stone is a nonprofit, correct?
Correct.
That um, that is serving the people that are spending their lives serving others is
Right.
so amazing. I love it. And it's not just men, right? Women
No,
can be.
not at all. We have, let me tell you what my role is. So,
Okay.
and a little bit about Standing Stone. It started
Yes.
around 2002 by Jim and Debbie Hogan. Jim was on staff at a church and saw the senior pastor experience a moral failure. And he was good friends with this pastor. And he went to him and said, brother, what happened? And he said, I just didn't feel like I had anybody I could talk to.
Mm.
And a few years later, same thing happened at another church where Jim was on staff. A pastor had a failing, also didn't feel like he had any place to go. So Jim and Debbie said, you know what, we've got to do something for people who are serving. So they started having retreats for ministers and their wives, and just a place to come and kind of get refreshed and renewed. And they started hearing from the pastors and their wives attending the retreats that, man, this is great, but I could use this on an ongoing basis instead of just an every now and then retreat. So then they started this other branch of the ministry that involves field shepherds, and that's what they call us. We're in the field. We do one-on-ones with pastors as needed, and we have both men on staff at Standing Stone and women on staff at Standing Stone. And men provide care to men serving in ministry, and the women on staff provide care to women serving in ministry. And it is absolutely free. They are never charged. Pastors are never sent a bill. They're not charged a nickel. Each of us who works with Standing Stone raises our own support, just like a missionary. So we raise our own funds. That way, the pastor and his wife and their family are never charged for anything. So the care is absolutely free.
That is such a needed ministry. That's a ministry.
I
Yeah,
think so too.
absolutely. And I think you, just knowing you and how you love people, like you have such a genuine love of people, and you have such a sweet and compassionate spirit. You're just going to be a huge blessing to so many, and I'm so excited.
Well, I appreciate that.
If
Go ahead.
you, well, because I know your past and we haven't gotten into it a lot, but
Yeah.
what would you say to someone who might be listening today that is out there considering going into ministry right now? Like, is there one piece of advice that you wish you knew before going into full-time ministry?
Probably. There's probably a bunch. One thing I would say, I think, is if there's anything else you can see yourself doing, do it.
Don't do ministry.
Well, I don't mean that. I can see how it probably sounded that way. I mean, if you go into ministry, it has to be or it should be maybe ripping off the rearview mirror and not looking back. If there's something in your life you plow into ministry and you go, man, but I really want to do this. I should have done this, or I should have pursued being this or that. You know, if there's anything else you can see yourself doing, maybe do it, because it requires wholeheartedness. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's what I mean. If there's anything else, it should be, man, I can't see myself doing anything else. And there's also the other component in this equation, that's a call from God, which is another discussion. But if you sense that, and there's nothing else you can see yourself doing, then absolutely. But it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. That's why if you can see yourself doing something else, maybe you should, because to do ministry for years and years and years, it's going to take a toll. It's going to be hard, but it's also going to be unbelievably rewarding too.
That is interesting that you say that, because a well-known country singer that shall remain nameless for now was asked, someone asked him, very successful country singer, asked him, what advice would you give to someone entering the music business? And he said the exact same thing about the music business. He said, if you can see
Really?
yourself doing anything else,
Huh.
do that. You can play music, you can enjoy music as a hobby, you don't have to not have music in your life, but the music business is hard. And it takes
Yeah.
that you get up every day and you look in the mirror and you go, I can't see myself doing anything else. I love it that much. I feel that knee deep in it, that you just, because he said there's days where you just go, this is too hard. I'm going to go be an accountant.
Right.
And I'll
Which
just
I'm sure is
play.
also hard. I'm
It's
sure
hard.
accountants had.
I guess we're all created, and I
Right.
truly believe that God creates each one of us with certain gifts, not just one gift, but just the way we're
Right.
built. Some people have thicker skin, they can handle a music business and ministry. I mean, you have both of
Right.
those. You kind of have to, I think, like you say, feel a calling to be there, because
Right.
there are some days where you're just like, this is not worth it.
Yeah. And I've had some of those real quickly in ministry. I mean, and in music, but mostly in the ministry area. Just real quick about something I think God is using to prepare me for this next step is the first church I served was in Harrodsburg, Kentucky. I was there 4 years.
Mm.
New senior pastor came on board and fired me. I hadn't done anything wrong, but he wanted his own staff. He was kind of an insecure leader. Sometimes a new coach comes in, they want their own team, their own coaching staff. I get it.
Yeah.
And that hurt because I hadn't done anything wrong. But we had this hurt inflicted upon us. And then we moved. I started talking to a church in Franklin. We came to Franklin, Tennessee to work at another church in the same role as worship pastor. I told them all about what happened at the other church, and they said, we're so sorry. The leadership said, we're so sorry. We need you to know that we don't treat people like that here. That will not happen to you here. And that sounded so good. That just felt like water on dry ground to me at the time.
Yeah.
And so we plow into this ministry, and they're almost 10 years. And I get called to a surprise meeting with the senior pastor, which was odd in itself. He wouldn't tell me what it was about. And show up at the meeting Monday morning, 8 a.m. It's him and 2 elders. And I wasn't told there were going to be any other people at the meeting. And so as soon as I opened the door, I thought, this probably isn't going to be a fun day. And that day they said, hey, we're making some changes. And we've decided we're going to let you go. And I was floored. I mean, had there been some conflict along the way? Sure, because that's part of interacting with people and working closely with people. But you work through that. It was any kind of conflicts that may have existed on the staff never rose to that level in my mind. So they let me go. And that one, at this point, our girls were older. They didn't remember the other one because they were itty bitty. But it inflicted a very profound, deep spiritual wound on my entire family. And you get fired from one church, you tell yourself, well, that happens occasionally. You get fired from 2 churches, the only 2 churches you've ever served, you get fired from at some point. I had to step back and go, maybe it's me.
Mm.
Maybe I wasn't supposed to be doing this. And I, Lord, did I miss you in all this? Was I even supposed to be doing ministry?
Oh, wow.
And I went through, man, some deep depression that I still deal with occasionally. Our entire family has been impacted by depression. Um, Went through a lot of self-doubt and questioning my purpose, if I was even supposed to be doing that. And I'll tell you one thing that amazed us. That last church in Franklin, Tennessee was about, I don't know, 900, maybe 1,000 people when they let me go. And out of those, let's just say that 1,000 people, to use a rough number, Laura and I could count on both hands the number of people who reached out to us and hung in there with us. And if you find out who your friends are when you go through something like that, whether it's church related or not, you just, the people who really love you and are your genuine friends, they rise to the occasion. And it's kind of shocking to think, man, I thought we knew more people than that we were genuinely friends with more people than that. But it's amazing who disappears when you go through something like that. And that was very
Yeah.
telling to us. We thought, well, then were we really a part of a genuine, authentic community? Was it all just fake on their parts? But anyway,
Oh,
but
yeah.
go
So
ahead.
you lost your job, you lost your
Hmm.
church, you lost
Hmm.
friendship circles. I
Yep.
mean, that's what I keep hearing repeatedly from people that were in ministry and then either chose to leave
Hmm.
or got fired. Either way,
Right.
it's like, oh, you're choosing, even if you chose to leave, a lot of times they say they chose to leave and then they just don't hear from the people in the church again. Um,
And I guess some of it's not always their fault because people don't know what to say. When a pastor leaves, like in my particular case, there was a lot of false statements going around about me. And Laura and I talked about that, and rumors started swirling. We expected that because the enemy's going to do that.
right.
And so people bump into you in the grocery store and they don't know what to say. So it's not all of them, it's all their fault. But I got a lot of somebody bump into me and they go, oh, there's Rob,
Mm.
poor Rob.
Poor Rob.
What, how you doing? And it was, I don't know, or they'd turn around. I would see people in the grocery aisle spot me, boop, turn around, go the other way, and just avoid you altogether. And you
Oh,
felt like a leper. But
well, I think that happens. Uh, I ran into a friend who had recently gone through a divorce, and she said, uh, you know what, we were talking about God and my girlfriend's ministries, and she said, you know what I wish you would do at some point. She said, I wish you would do a retreat, a weekend retreat on how to be a friend to a friend in crisis.
mm,
Because she said, when I was going through my divorce, I felt so abandoned by everyone around me. She said, all of our couple friends, it was like, she was like, it almost felt like they were afraid to call me because they thought, even the wives, like, oh, because their marriage fell apart, it might be contagious. Like it might, yes, that's what she said. She felt like they all wanted to stay away because, oh, we don't want that to affect our marriage, or they just didn't know what to say, or they just were fair weather friends or whatever. But the truth is that she did find out a lot of them just kind of went silent because they didn't know what to do. And they
right,
felt so awkward that they didn't contact her at all. And that is a need for us to learn, how do we support our friends well when they're going through crisis? Like, what do you say? Because sometimes you'll say things and you're like, oh, that was stupid, I shouldn't have said that,
right.
and
Well,
it's hard.
I may have this wrong. I hope I'm not misquoting, but I think it was Brother Lawrence who wrote a book called The Power of Presence. And
Mm,
sometimes it's just enough to be there.
yes.
You don't have to say anything, just to show up. Um, I spoke at my dad's funeral 28 years ago, and 10 minutes before it started, two friends walked in who had driven probably 6 or 7 hours, two guys. Um, walked in. I didn't even get to really talk to them. They sat down, but I saw them across the room. And that gave me so much strength, just knowing that someone loved me enough to rearrange their schedule to come and support me in a moment of need. And then when it was over, they kind of waved and they left and drove another 6 or 7 hours back home. Never said a word, but boy, that helped. And sometimes just being there and sitting with someone is enough, you know?
Yeah, that makes me cry to think about that. It's like
Oh, you don't forget things
you
like that.
don't forget.
When
That's right.
people love you that way, you just, at least that stuck with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll tell you
Absolutely.
this because you know this person. One of them was Phil Miller.
I was gonna say, I said, I think one of those is Phil Miller. I love
Yeah,
Phil and Marcia Miller.
that
They're
was
the
that was one of the ones that walked in and just, loved us and supported us, and then went right back home. And we just, like I said, you just don't forget things like that. We love
well, and Phil,
them.
and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, did you and Phil meet? Like y'all are longtime
Mhm.
friends, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Were you in college or?
No, we didn't go to the same college, but we've been friends a long time. Just through, I think we met through a summer youth camp I was a part of for a long time, called Summer in the Sun. Sun spelled SON, at Kentucky Christian College, and I was a worship leader at that for a few years. And he would bring youth groups and to that event. It was uh, one of the most one of my favorite memories of stuff I've done, especially when I worked at the college. But I think that's where we met, and we've just been friends for a long time. He's been a good one. He's been a dear one. But and I have a few others too. I don't have a ton, but I have a few that I've known a long time that I keep going back to.
It's funny with friendships and men. I remember one time, I don't know, not too long ago, talking to my therapist about I was worried. I said, I go out with my girlfriends often. Like, we're all like, I'm going out to dinner with Kim and Britt, or, different groups of girls. We get together. And I said, I don't see my husband like going out with groups of guys. And I worry that, you know, about his friendships. Like I should be. And the counselor said, you know what? He said, what do you want them to do? Like go out to bar? I mean, when men are younger and they hang out in groups, usually they're like looking for girls. He said, normally, he goes, it's actually really normal for men in happily committed relationships to only need just a few, guy friends that they check in with. They don't normally go hang out in groups the way girls do.
Right.
I was like, he goes, I don't, and I started thinking about it. He said, do you know other men that are go hanging out in groups? And I was like, well, I guess really not. And I don't know if you ever watched Saturday Night Live, but
Mhm.
a couple of weeks ago, they had a skit called Man Park.
I saw that. That was great.
I've watched it like 10 times, and I showed it to Mike and Todd Woolsey this we were like, it's like that is so funny. They were like,
Dead
Marvel,
on.
Marvel,
Right.
Marvel, Marvel, Marvel. If you guys haven't seen Man Park, y'all need to watch it. It's
Yeah,
hilarious.
that was great. That was great.
How do you though nurture as a man? Like how do you nurture your friendships and I'm sure you have long term and then shorter ones, but
Mhm.
it's friendships are important for men too.
They are for me. I guess the way I nurture, I just try to stay in touch with friends, and I love occasionally doing stuff in a big group. 8 or 10 of us getting together and going to a movie or something. But personally, I prefer just one on one, or us and another couple getting together. I love those kind of settings. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of, in a big setting, I tend to, I don't know, I kind of freeze up a little. But I just love getting together with them, grabbing coffee, catching up, um, just staying in regular contact. But then there's friends. I've got a handful of guy friends that I've known for years that I may go months without talking to them. But when I do talk to them, we pick up exactly where we left off, and it's like we were never apart.
I love
And
that.
those great friendships to have. And it
Mm-hmm.
just, like there was never, like you just spoke to them yesterday, and it could have been a years that you talked to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a handful of those, and I mean, I really value those. I value all my friends, but I'm grateful for those friendships that have endured and that you pick up right where you left off.
Yeah.
So
Mike's
I
the
guess I
same.
just nurture them by just trying to stay in touch
Yeah. Stay in touch.
regularly.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about Mike? What were you saying?
Well, he's the same way. He loves getting together with like a couple. Like he's not antisocial or anything,
Right. Oh,
but
not at all. No.
and he does love. I mean, like he loves when we go do our house concerts. Let's talk on that for just a second.
Okay.
We Mike and Rob and I go as a trio, and then Laura comes when she can a lot, and we do house concerts around the country. And we have a little trailer, and we have our PA and all our equipment, and we will set up in your living room if you want us to. And
That's true.
we do a house concert, and those are social events. Mike loves those, but
I do too.
they're still sort of intimate situations.
Right.
You've been doing house concerts longer than me. Why don't you tell everybody what a house concert is?
If I could do house concerts every week, I would. I
Really?
love doing house concerts.
Yeah, me too.
And I especially love doing them with you and Mike. A house concert is just an opportunity to gather in someone's home. Usually a big crowd for a house concert might be 20 or 30 people, 40 maybe at the most. And like you said, we set up in somebody's living room or bonus room, and we share original songs, tell stories behind the songs, a lot like what someone might experience if they went to the Bluebird Cafe or other songwriter venues, but it's in someone's home. And it doesn't really cost anything on the part of the host. All we need is a house that would accommodate, 30, 40 people. It helps if somebody really loves having people into their home and they have kind of the gift of hospitality.
Right.
Sometimes it involves food, sometimes it doesn't. Some people will have desserts or coffee, and some people will invite people to bring a covered dish, and some people don't do any kind of food. There's a lot of different options for that, but we just come and set up, and then we take donations, and people know in advance that we're going to pass the hat, and that's how we're going to be paid for our time.
Mhm.
But the host, it doesn't cost them anything financially unless they choose to provide food on their own, which they don't have to do. But there's no financial cost to them. They just provide the place and gather some music loving friends, and then we show up and have an evening together. I love it.
I do too. You play a lot. You play around town, several restaurants, clubs, even the airport. You're at the airport. If y'all are flying into Nashville, look for Rob.
You might see me.
You might see him. But I was going to say, of all those things, like, what is your favorite place to play? Is it house concerts?
I would say yes, house concerts, and then locally the Bluebird Cafe, because it's like a house concert. But
it is.
I love doing house concerts.
Yeah, me too.
There's so much fun, at least for us, and it's just a good excuse to get people into your home and do something different. Most people who attend a house concert, and this has nothing to do with the three of us that do house concerts, but typically when somebody will host a house concert or somebody attends one for the first time, when it's over, they say, man, I want to do this again. This was fun. And again, nothing to do with the performers, just the experience of sitting in somebody's living room, hearing some live music, making some new friends. It's just a fun experience. And I think most people who experience it the first time want to do it again.
Yeah. Or people will go, hey, I want to have one now in my house. Someone that came, they're like,
or next time I'm going to invite these friends, and because they would love this, so.
Yeah.
They're always house concerts.
I love it too. And I can't wait till hopefully we can get some going next spring, because I miss doing that with you. And
same here.
I was just realized we didn't do any in 2020 and we didn't do any this year. So it's been 2 years since we've done some. So I am really, we are due. Let's get out there. So anyone that's listening, if you're interested in house concerts, I will put some links. I have a house concert page on my website, and you probably do too, Rob.
I do.
So we'll list Rob's website and mine too, so you can learn more. If you want us to come and invade your home and eat your cookies, we will be there.
We will do it.
So as far as music, what's the next step for you and your music career? I know you're doing Standing Stone, but you're not walking away from music. You were not allowed to do that.
Well, thank you. I'm still doing music, and I'll probably be doing a little more now that I don't really have the confines of a schedule at retail world. It's a little more flexible now.
Cool.
But I'll still be playing around here locally and out of town when I can. But I'm actually in the middle of recording a new album project that your husband, Mike Waldron, is producing for me.
That's right.
And it's been a slow process, not through anything. It's not intentional. It's just life has happened in the middle of it. Mike and I got started on it early this year, and then my father-in-law got very sick, and then we cared for him, and then it's just kind of been one thing after the other.
Mhm.
We've got about half the songs mostly done, and maybe later this year and early next year we'll get it finished up and have something new with a new batch of songs next year.
I know.
And you're going to sing on it, Marcia.
I'm excited.
I hope.
But of course, and as the producer's wife, I've already, I hear him working on the stuff. The songs are fantastic. Your singing is fantastic. It's going to be an amazing project. So all of you guys, I think you did a Kickstarter to get that going, and anyone that's donated, y'all are going to be really glad that you did. Your money was well spent. It's going to be a very cool, very cool project. And I can't believe that we are running out of time. So, but I do want to
talk too much.
you have not. It's hard. These interviews go by so quickly, and especially with my friends, because we could talk forever. But I do want to. Normally, I ask 3 questions to everyone at the very end to kind of end the conversation, but we've sort of covered some of those. But I would like to know, just to end on a spiritual aspect, because I know that after you left, after you were fired from that last church, I know that you have struggled to really settle into a new church, you and your wife, I think, here and there. And I'm probably, a lot of it is just, I mean, I went through several years without a church myself. It's really hard sometimes. You don't trust the religious aspect. The church business of it all becomes very intermingled in your faith, but you guys have not lost your faith. I mean, I have seen it affect some people's faith, and they just walk away and they're like, okay, this was all just baloney. I've been listening to a podcast called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, which documents the rise of that huge church in Seattle and then the crumbling of it. And last week's episode was particularly heartbreaking. I mean, if your faith is not intact and you listen to that, I mean, I told a friend, I said, gosh, that would make me never want to step foot in a church again. There's some hard stuff in there. However, after all you've been through, I mean, you and Laura are some of the most deeply God-loving, Jesus-loving, faith-filled people I know, and you've kept that intact. So I'm just curious, like, what are your main spiritual practices right now, or what's one that is really meaning that keeps you connected to God, our Creator, right now?
My main one is prayer right now. We went through a lot of what you just described. We were hurt by the experiences we had. Our 3 daughters, who are all grown now, in particular, kind of when it happened, and they were so hurt and so disappointed. A couple of them said, if this is how church leaders are going to treat people, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Yeah, they were so hurt by people they trusted. And look, church is made up of people, and people are fallen. We all are. Mm-hmm. But those experiences for us were at the hands of church leaders who are imperfect, but neither situation was handled spiritually correctly, so that it hurt us. And we did struggle to find another church. We're still kind of working on that, to be honest, after the pandemic. But I guess I've questioned my purpose for a while, but I can't say that we lost our faith, because our faith wasn't in the church. Our faith, we try to keep our faith rooted in Jesus. Yeah, he's the only thing that's not going to change and disappoint like that. Not easy at all, but and I leaned on my wife, and I think she leaned on me through that whole process. And but yeah, it did a number on us, and we're still, I think we're on the other side of it now. It's been 11 years, but there's still there's a scar,
Hmm.
and that's okay, because the scar reminds us that there was once a wound and now it's healing. And that's what the
Mm.
scar, you can remember that the Lord is accomplishing healing when you see a scar. So it's not a bad thing to have those, but no fun to get them though.
Yeah.
But prayer is probably right now the one that is my favorite spiritual practice, I would
That,
say.
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
I talk to the Lord in the car,
Uh,
in the
out loud.
shower, out loud, absolutely.
Oh, I love that.
Wherever, just try to maintain a dialogue throughout the day. Sometimes it's just a sentence or two, but
There's a book, one of my favorite books, written by Diane Moody. It's called Confessions of a Prayer Slacker. And it's a
I love that.
great, it's a great little book. And it changed my prayer life. Just talking about different ways to approach prayer. And how you don't have to, it doesn't have to be done any certain specific way.
Right.
There's all ways to have conversations with God. And also there's times to just shut up and listen in prayer too.
Absolutely.
I never knew that. Oh, that's what meditation is. Okay, we got this. It means just give God time to talk back and not
Right.
just like, but that's great. I love that. And like I said, I love seeing people. I mean, I don't think anyone's gonna, n- you know, necessarily go through, stay in one church all their lives and not get
Right.
some wounds from it. I mean,
Right.
religion, it can be messy.
Yep.
But there's a great Richard Rohr quote that I love that said, religion uh, is the fingers that point us to the moon, but it's not the moon itself.
Hmm.
And I love that, because it's like, yeah, religion can be a beautiful thing to help point us towards God, but it's not God.
Right.
And so sometimes we have to separate the two at times, especially if we've been hurt by religious circles or religion. And hopefully you can find your way back. But
And God can redeem those
yeah,
hurts.
yes,
And that's one of the last things I'd like to share with you and anyone listening today. And I want to read it so I don't misquote it. But
yes,
2 Corinthians 1:4 and 5 says that the Lord comforts us in all of our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we received from God. For just as we share abundantly in the sufferings of Christ, so also our comfort abounds through Christ. So I'm hoping that the hurt I experienced at the hands of a couple of churches will now come into play as I sit with pastors who are going through tough times, and maybe some of them have been fired, either justly or unjustly. But I understand that because I've been through it. And I think that's what that scripture is talking about. No matter what, if it's the loss of a child or a divorce or the loss of a job, if you've been through something that was a profound hurt, God can redeem that by maybe one day using you to help someone who's going through the exact same thing, because there's just power in sitting with someone that they've walked this path and they understand. And that alone helps. And I think if nothing else good happens out of those terrible things that happen to us along life's way, that's one thing that God can use to redeem it, by using us to help others who are going through the same thing. So
that is beautiful
that's what I'm
and so
hoping.
true. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I don't want to have, if someone's going to give me some advice on how to go through a situation, knowing that they've been in that situation before, their advice, it weighs heavier for me, right?
Right. It carries more weight.
Absolutely. And so, for someone who wasn't divorced to tell me what I needed to do to get through my divorce
Right.
versus someone who had been through a painful divorce, not
Right.
exact, like you said, not everyone's journeys are exactly the same, but they get it. They get it more, and it
Right.
helps to go. And when they say, you know what, this is what I did to get through that, that weighs heavier for me. Absolutely. So I
Right.
know, and when they say God doesn't waste any tears, he doesn't waste any hurts, I think that's kind of what that means, at least it does to me, is that
Right.
all of the pain and hurt that we go through can be redeemed by God. And He's going to heal
Right.
us. God's going to heal us. And then He's going to help us use that hurt to help other people. And
Right.
so I know that you are going to be such a blessing to all these pastors that are counseled by you and loved on by you. I'm so proud of you, Rob.
Thank you,
So proud
Marcia.
of you. And I'm
Thank
so
you.
proud to be your friend.
Same here. Laura and I
And
love you and Mike so much.
same here. Big love fest. And we're going to see each other very soon. We need to
Yeah.
get together. That's what.
And we'd like to see some of the folks listening at a house concert.
Yes,
soon.
house concerts. We're going to put links to our house concerts. We're going to put links to Standing Stone. If anyone out there is listening to this and thinks, I want to support a nonprofit like this, or support Rob personally in his journey, there's going to be links for you to do that as well.
Or if they
And
also know of a pastor that's hurting, or they know someone that,
yes,
could use, you used the word safe earlier in our conversation, and that's key for Standing Stone. It's safe, it's confidential. My wife won't even know the pastors I'm meeting with. It's that confidential. So if anyone knows someone working in ministry that they think could use a safe, confidential friend from Standing Stone, reach out to us and we'll be in touch with them. It would be a privilege to serve them in that way.
that's a beautiful thing. Thank you, Rob Harris.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for the honor of being involved in this wonderful podcast. I've
Thanks.
enjoyed it so much.
Oh, I'm so
Thanks.
glad. I've loved having you here, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Have a good day. I'm waving.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.